Hello, my name is Zach Larson and I'm one of the founders of Small Business Development Group, and in this video we are going to be reviewing the federal contract market for consulting services for fiscal year 2020, and we're going to do a deep dive into the actual award data to answer a couple of fundamental questions. Number one, what percentage and what number of federal consulting contracts during that time frame were actually posted and available for public bid and competition? And then number two, what percentage and what number of these contracts did the federal government only receive one offer? And then finally, based on the answers to those two questions, we're going to speak a little bit about how your firm can pursue some of these unpublished single offer contracts and put yourself in a position to be one of the companies that's offering these services to the federal government. We start at beta.sam.gov because that's where the data research report was pulled, the award data. And if you have an account at beta.sam, you can pull your own data set using an ad hoc report. I've got one that I call a deep dive report that I've already pulled. And I want to explain a little bit about what is on this report and what's not on this report. So to filter it, to make sure that we're dealing just with accurate spending data, I've eliminated anything that is a non-financial transaction line item, such as exercising the option of a contract, an administrative change, anything that would muddy up the data, because all of those line items have award amounts and dollars, but they're not actual financial transactions, they're administrative transactions. So we've eliminated that data. We've also eliminated any other administrative task, like a company that was awarded a GSA schedule. That gets recorded in this data set, but it's not a financial transaction. That's, again, an administrative transaction. So once you've eliminated all of that, that noise, what you're left with is the actual spending data for consulting services. And by consulting services, I'm using two NAICS codes because they do a pretty good job of providing a good overview of the marketplace. What I would prefer to do with a client would be a keyword search augmented by the codes. But for the purpose of this demonstration, we're going to go just with the codes. So the two codes that I'm using are 541611, which is Administrative Management and General Management Consulting Services. And then the other code in the data set is 611430, Professional and Management Development Training. Let's go ahead and load our pivot table so that we can analyze this data a little closer. So the first thing I want to look at is the overall market. And you can see here that once you've taken out all the administrative transactions, you're left with 9,388 contract actions for 4.5, almost $4.6 billion. Now let's look at what percentage of this went to small business. So we can see here, in terms of the count, 62% went to small business. And in terms of dollars, 47% of the dollars went to small business. So obviously small business is an integral part of the overall market. Let's delete these. And let's begin answering, or trying to answer, our first question, which is what percentage and count of these opportunities were posted for public bid? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how the data itself answers this question. So according to this data set, there is a category called listed in FedBizOps. Now, FedBizOps is the old term. It's now beta.sam.gov, but it's the same principle. They're trying to record in the data which of these contracts were posted for public bid at beta.sam.gov. And according to this data set, the number is 3,183. Now, there's a number of reasons why that count is inflated. I'll give you one example. If you're familiar with the concept of an indefinite delivery contract, there are indefinite delivery contracts that are single award indefinite delivery contracts, which very simply means the contractor won a contract with the government for, let's say, 1 year with an option of up to 5 years, whereby they are the only vendor for that 5-year period that can submit an order or fulfill an order on that master contract. And if that original indefinite delivery contract was posted at beta.sam.gov for competition and bid, each of the delivery orders over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, up to 5 years will be coded as, yes, this was on the open market in beta.sam because the original master contract was there. So even though you'll never see any of the opportunities to fulfill any of these orders over the next 5 years because you didn't win that original master contract, it's still going to show up here in the data that all of these orders were full and open competition. So that's an example of how this data gets skewed pretty substantially. So one of the first things we can do to try to rectify that and get a more clear answer is let's look at how many unique solicitation IDs there were. Because if I look at solicitation ID, that example I just gave you, it's going to be the same solicitation ID for each of those delivery orders. So that'll eliminate that redundancy. So do a count on all the legitimate solicitation IDs. We're down to, as you can see here, 2,110. All right, so we just went from 3,183 to 2,110. So that drops the percentage of what was in FedBizOps from 34% to 22%. I still think that number's high versus what I know about the reality of the marketplace. So we're going to try one more experiment. We're going to go back to beta.sam.gov and we're going to go to contract opportunities. We're going to search contract opportunities. And I'm going to run the same search criteria, but instead of running it on the award side, I'm going to run it here on the solicitation side. So let's add our same NAICS codes. And we're going to look for solicitations or combined synopsis solicitations, because those are the only two that we count. Those are the only two types of notifications that we count as solicitations. And publish date, we're going to run a custom range of 10/1/2019 to 9/30/2020. All right, we're going to filter this. And then we're going to say, show me everything, not just the ones that are still active. And what we get is 597 results. So according to beta.sam.gov, and again, this isn't a perfect correlation because award notices are typically, they can be posted 7 to 14 to 30, sometimes longer, days after the solicitation. So we're not looking at an apples to apples comparison, but we are looking at the same time frame. So this is 1 year's worth of award data. I just looked at 1 year's worth of solicitation data. And the numbers aren't even close, right? So that 597 is significantly less than either of these two. So let's see what that is in terms of a percentage. You're looking at 6.3%, 6%. All right, so the data says 34%. When you refine the data a little bit, it gets down to 22%. And then when you use the actual solicitation system that the data is derived from, it looks like 6%. So I'm going to assume these are probably, the range is probably somewhere between 6 and 22%, which means at minimum, 4 of 5 are not posted publicly. So you're only seeing, at best, 20% of the market. Reality is probably somewhere between 5 and 10% of the market. All right, so now that we've uncovered what percentage and what count of these get posted publicly, the next thing that I want to look at is how many of these awards only get one offer. So I've taken the original data set and I've refined it down to only include the awards where the government codes it as receiving only or having received only one offer. So let's do the same thing. We're going to run a pivot table. So when we look at the contracts where the government only received one offer, we have a total count of 5,074 for about 1.8, almost 1.9 billion dollars. That is a significant amount of that overall market where the government only received one offer. So what I want to do is identify within this single offer market, how many of these were actually available for open competition for any kind of business. Really, when I say any kind of business, I'm talking small business because I'm not really worried about the large businesses. They can take care of themselves. Let's look at first what type of extent competed information we have. All right, so let's check this out. All right, what do we have here? Well, full and open competition. That is, we are not setting this aside. There's not some special category. The claim here is full and open competition. This is open in the marketplace and anybody could have bid. So what I'd be curious about is, okay, if it was full and open competition, you would think all 1,620 were posted at beta.sam, right? Nope, only 717. So even though these were not posted at beta.sam, they were considered full and open competition. You're starting to see how the language doesn't match up with the data? All right. Not competed under SAP. What does that mean? Well, what that means is, especially if you're a small business, pay attention. That means that the federal government was allowed to award that contract because it was under what's called the Simplified Acquisition Procedures Threshold. That's what SAP stands for, Simplified Acquisition Procedures. Because it was under the Simplified Acquisition Procedure Threshold, the contracting officer had the ability to reduce competition, and the rules allowed them to do that. So they did not have to compete it because it was under the Simplified Acquisition Procedure Threshold. And so those companies that had an established relationship, were on the radar with those contracting officers, won those contracts without having to go out to an open public bid. The next group is competed under SAP, which means this was a restricted competition to probably 2 or 3 small businesses. And in this case, obviously, they only got one offer. So they may have submitted a request for quote to 2 or 3 businesses, and only one business came back to provide a quote. So that's the only offer they got, but they still competed it because they reached out to 3 businesses. Now, none of that includes you because you're not getting any sort of public notification. You're not getting any sort of announcement that this is available. You're not included. If you're not part of that group that contracting officer or that procurement team is specifically reaching out to, then you're not part of the equation. That's what we mean by the hidden market. This is what we mean by, beta.sam.gov is just an entry point. It's a starting point. It may not be the best. Really where you want to be, if you're a small business that lacks experience in the federal market, this is where you want to be in this SAP world. And then this last category, full and open competition after exclusion of sources. That's a good opportunity for a new or an inexperienced company as well, because what they're doing is, for whatever reason, sometimes it's because the incumbent is not allowed to get the contract again. They have to rotate it out. Sometimes it's because the government's just looking for alternative sources of supply. They don't want to create a dependency with one company. But they're excluding the incumbent, or they're excluding the standard companies that are typically known to offer that service, and they're looking for quote-unquote new blood. So you can see here that of these single offer contracts, the only ones that you would not be able to pursue would be this not available for competition. And that's because it's set aside for a certain kind of company. It might have gone through what's called the Ability One program or strategic sourcing. So this is really the only place where you're likely not going to be able to compete. Full and open competition, not competed under SAP, means that it was a simplified acquisition and it went to a small business. Competed under SAP is a small business competition. Not competed is not the same as not available for competition. Not competed just means they made the decision. It could be compelling urgency. Could have been a COVID situation where they had a rapid response. But they coded it as not competed and were justified in doing so. And then you got this full and open competition after exclusion of sources. So if you add all these up, you're looking at 4,357 federal contracts for consulting services that were available to your company potentially if you were involved and included within the buying process, where the government only received one offer. 1.4 billion. 4,357 contract actions for almost $1.4 billion that were available to anybody that could provide those services, but the government only received one offer. Okay. To recap, you're not seeing 4 out of 5 of the contracts, and over 4,000 times you could have potentially competed for that contract, but you weren't included in the equation. So what do you do with those two facts? If you can't see the bid and you're not included when the government's reaching out, how do you go from where you are today to becoming involved in the specific types of contracts for the services that your firm provides? That's where we can help you. So my recommendation would be schedule a consultation on the form above on this website and let us walk you through our process for helping you identify all of the contracts for your services, not just the 20% that are posted publicly or less, and specifically focus on the single offer opportunities where if your company were engaged and known and connected, you would have a great opportunity to compete for and win these single offer opportunities. Schedule an appointment above, and let's get started penetrating this hidden market with your firm. Thank you.